Welcome back to Sekulow. We are joined right now by Senior Counsel, Global Affairs, former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo on the broadcast. Secretary Pompeo, we've been spending the last half hour really discussing what came out of that Defense Department sort of admitting that the withdrawal from Afghanistan became this sort of gift, a propaganda gift. And then you had a response from Kirby going on Fox and Friends and saying, no. They actually marveled at our incredible response. We did something that no one could do, and an effective, withdrawal from Afghanistan was what we did. It was effective. It was fast. It was better than anyone had ever done. Pulling the wool over our eyes as if we didn't all live through it a year ago. What was your initial reaction to this?
Oh, goodness. I mean, that's just simply gaslighting Americans who know better, who know the facts.
Right.
I'm still heartbroken by the fact we lost 13 Americans at the gates there in Afghanistan. But the implications go far beyond that. Not only was it a gift to the Chinese Communist Party, but Chairman Kim would have seen that. The Ayatollah in Iran would have seen that. The Taliban are surely still measuring the curtains all across the country, knowing that the United States is weak and not prepared to do the things we've always done. We've never left folks behind before, and we did. And so to hear Kirby out there this morning saying this wasn't a gift to so many didn't. Frankly, when you say gift, it weakens America, puts us in a more difficult position to deter our adversaries. Americans know that's not true. I wish they wouldn't try to pretend that it wasn't so. It's embarrassing, and it's not factual, and it further weakens the credibility of the United States to our friends and allies around the world as well.
Yeah, it's incredibly disrespectful, as you said, also to those Gold Star families who all lived through, quite literal hell to be a part of this just botched withdrawal. And Will, that's part of this, but there's so much more.
Right. Well, in that report as well, so it was the military and security developments involving the People's Republic of China is what the Department of Defense sent to Congress. And one of the items in that I noticed as well, besides this, the Chinese government using the propaganda tools, but that their rapid nuclear expansion by the Chinese military that's happening and how quickly they're ramping up with new types of weaponry as well as expanding their nuclear stockpile. My concern is when you see the movements by the Chinese government as well as capitalizing on the failures of the Biden administration, I'm concerned, is the United States doing what it needs to do to keep up with our adversaries at this point?
So these are absolutely twin risks. You identify that exactly right. There is the perception risk, and deterrence is all about real capabilities backed up by a demonstrated willingness to use them. That's how you deter the bad guys. We talked about earlier, right, withdrawal from Afghanistan. Now we've got Vladimir Putin, who wasn't deterred in Ukraine. The Chinese Communist Party surely sees that as well. And then you have the hard power problem itself. I read a little bit of that report. They are roughly going to triple their nuclear capability. The Chinese Communist Party every month conducts more missile testing than the rest of the world combined. They have advanced space systems now. This is a truly capable foe, and the United States has been sitting on our back foot. We've allowed this to happen. We've not matched it. We're still in a good place. Our military remains the greatest military in the world, but the gap is certainly closing, and the Chinese Communist Party is accelerating in closing that gap and building out a capability in the Pacific that will rival our own.
Yeah, and Secretary Pompeo, I do think that I'd love to get your read on what's happening also in China in general. If you have been, obviously you have been, but if people who are listening maybe haven't seen, because it is hard to sometimes get the footage out and people to see what's happening, but they're calling it sort of the biggest uprising and protest since Tiananmen Square happening in China right now. My question to you is, and that's a lot of that's a response to the zero COVID policy, and to kind of give people a brief, they are looking to eradicate it completely, which means if there's one case or a few cases, things going back into full shutdown, full lockdown. You had people trapped in Shanghai Disneyland for an undetermined amount of time till they all tested negative before they could leave. They had this situation where a fire broke out and the fire department was not able to go stop it, and I think 10 plus people died because of COVID policies. This is what's happening in China. Obviously, they're using COVID as a cover for their control, but you actually do see this sort of uprising. And as someone who obviously served as Secretary of State and was deeply involved in a lot of situations, when you see this response from the people of China, what is your read on it? Does it give you hope? Does it mean anything? Just your thoughts.
So it's pretty remarkable to watch both the scope and the scale and the nature of these protests. They are unique. They are historic. They do go back at least 30 years since we've seen anything. But even this is different. These are middle-class people. This is a broader, deeper set of socioeconomic conditions that the Chinese Communist Party is putting on the deal. The deal always was, you give up your political freedom, we'll make your life better. And they're not doing that. They're not making lives better for Chinese citizens all across the country. And these uprisings are a direct result of that. You know, there's this irony, right? It's the Chinese Communist Party that foisted this virus upon the world, and now it's coming. Everybody said, oh, they solved it there. They knew how to build hospitals in China. Well, it turns out all they did was delay the challenge that's in front of them. I pray for the Chinese people that are protesting. It is likely to end with the Chinese Communist Party putting their foot down and bringing tanks to the streets, much like they did in 1989. I hope that's not what happens. And I hope the Chinese Communist Party will see that people simply want basic freedoms, the capacity to go out and build their families, and they begin to change the way they deal with their own people. The Chinese Communist Party doesn't represent them, and it needs to change its ways.
Yes, I feel kind of ignorant to that. And I feel actually seeing this, I get very emotional watching some of this because I'll be honest, maybe I bought in a little to the propaganda that, like you said, the deal with the people is, you know, you don't get political freedom, but we make things better. And it kind of felt like, from all the footage you've seen and all this, that the people of China are on board with the way that their government is run, even if it's horrible, even if we know how non-free it is. It did have that feeling that a lot of people, like you said, the middle class kind of there, was on board for this. So to see that response in the streets is pretty moving. And hopefully, as you said, it's unlikely to, like you said, they're likely to put their foot down. But what you hope is this is a spark that really could cause a more significant change in these areas of the world.
Yeah, I pray that it's so. I think in the short term, it's going to be incredibly difficult. The struggle inside will be difficult. But in the medium and long term, I think what this shows is that basic human dignity is something that people demand everywhere. The Chinese people have been suffering under this for a long time. They can watch Xi Jinping be coronated to be the leader for life, and they can see something's got to give. And I hope there will be. And I hope the United States will firmly come out in support of the Chinese people. Something's got to change. And if it does, then that's fantastic for the Chinese people. It's great for the world, too. 1.4 billion people cannot live in a surveillance state like Xi Jinping has been driving. And his intentions are global. The United States needs to take this threat incredibly seriously, and supporting the Chinese people is one of the ways we can reduce the risk to us here at home.
Yeah, absolutely. Pray for those people. Pray for the church that's in China, a lot of the underground church, because there's so much that's happening that we just don't see. Will, you got something?
Well, and you brought up that you hope the U.S. government would speak out in support of the protesters. What we did see was a very weak statement from the spokesperson out of the National Security Council earlier this week that basically said, zero COVID is not a policy we're pushing here in the United States. And then did say, we've long said everyone has the right to peacefully protest here in the United States and around the world. A very weak statement out of our National Security Council in response to the issues that were going on, the protests that were going on. Are we doomed to see out of this administration, unless something very much changes, a very tepid Green Revolution in Iran style response from the Biden administration?
Boy, it sure looks that way. And the history, well, now coming on 2 years of this administration, would suggest that's the case. Well, I regret it. I saw that comment. By the way, the comment shouldn't come from the National Security Council or its spokesman. It should come from the president himself. And it should be strong and clear, and should be a clarion call for freedom for the people of China. It's pretty easy to do, unless you're President Biden, who's had a meeting with Xi Jinping just a few weeks ago in Bali and said, "Can't we all just get along?" The truth is, Xi Jinping has no intention of just getting along, and we can see not only what he does to his own people, but the risk he poses here to our homeland. And I wish this president had the capacity to just make the simple statement that we're supporting the people of China in their quest for freedom.